Section T-16 had been breached. One of the Tyranid boarding pods had made it through the 𝗍𝗂's protective barrage, wounded and trailing 𝗍𝗂, but with its internal gestation sacs intact. The 𝗍𝗂's external picked casters had caught it as it latched its lamprey-like maw onto a section of hull and began to gnaw. The grinding motion of its rows of serrated teeth, aided by the toxic bile continuously spewed by its acidic gut. Section T-16 was the first part of the ship beyond the armor plating the creature had attached itself to. It was an external service corridor, largely disused, lying frigid and dark. Its bare metal walls and pipes scummed with void mold. 𝗍𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗀 and 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗃𝗂𝗃 entered it just as the boarding creature's bile burned its way through the last of the plasteel and adamantium, spilling out into the corridor in a stinking yellow tide, writhing with alien insects. The two Carcharodons had descended into the service corridor alone. 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗃𝗂𝗃 knew better than to question the Red Wake's decision not to bring any of the Red Brethren to the breach. There were times when the Reaper Lord of the Void brooked no competition for the kill.
"Close the void lock,"
𝗍𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗀 ordered, over the ship-wide Vox channel. The heavy doors leading to the service tunnel could be closed in the event of a hull breach, sealing the resultant vacuum off from the rest of the ship. Doing so meant the Red Wake and the Pale Nomad would be trapped until the disengagement protocols allowed the lock to be opened once more. It also meant the Xenos would take longer to access the rest of the ship. A buzzer sounded, and the corridor shuddered as the doors behind 𝗍𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗀 and 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗃 ground shut. The lighting began to flicker as this section of the ship switched to reserve power. The bile spurting from the breach had reduced to a trickle, leaking through the molten hole burrowed in the 𝗍𝗂's hull. For a moment, there was nothing but the patter of the alien fluids and the distant vibrating heartbeats of the battle barge's engines and weapon systems. Then, the first Xenos emerged. It dragged itself from the fleshy depths of the boarding creature and out through the breach, splashing down amidst the spreading bile on 4 of its 6 limbs. It was large, a Tyranid warrior genus, modified for boarding operations. The digits of its upper limbs ended in diamond-hard claws useful for rending open bulkheads, while those lower down were arranged bioweapon mesh that drooled more acidic bile. Its front was more heavily armored than usual, chitin plates protecting its torso and elongated skull in the confines of the narrow tunnels and corridors it had been bred to kill in. Its entire body was slick and dripping with embryonic fluids. Still on 4 limbs, it turned its head slowly towards the two Carcharodons at the end of the corridor and emitted a low, warning hiss.
"Remain behind me, Pale Nomad,"
𝗍𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗃 said, beginning to advance towards the Xenos. The creature stood and began to move towards the Red Wake, picking up speed. Behind it, another was dragging itself through the breach, claws scraping fused adamantium. 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗃 gripped his force staff tighter, the green stone at its tip glowing with psychic power. The first warrior shrieked and broke into a charge, its hooves drumming on the deck plates. 𝗍𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗀 answered it with a great, electrified crack as his talons sprang forward from their gauntlets, bathed in blue energy. Hunger and Slake had awoken. 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗃 had seen the Red Wake fight and kill many times before. Regardless, it was always a special privilege to witness the elemental destruction unleashed when the master of the Carcharodon Astra was called upon to render judgment. 𝗍𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗀 met the first of the boarding Tyranid warriors head-on, his own charge making the entire service tunnel quake. The force of his impact carried the Xenos off its hooves, slamming it through the air and then back down into the deck plates with an ear-splitting crack. 𝗍𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗀 planted one great boot on its chitin-plated breast and, fast as lightning, slashed down from left to right with hunger. The great swing of the gauntlet's charged lightning claws sheared through the wall to the Carcharodon's left, severed the warrior's head, and carried on to slice into the wall on the right, leaving a trio of glowing gouges to either side that were immediately splattered with purple ichor. The red wake moved on immediately, his weight cracking open the twitching warrior's carapace as he lunged towards the next of its brood kindred. Slake took this one, its wicked hooked tips scything down the warrior's skull to its groin, releasing a burst of viscous gore and writhing biothings. A follow-up thrust from hunger cracked the tyrannid's skull apart in a welter of grey cranial matter. The combined force and speed of the Red Wake's attacks was without equal. It was to be expected that the hulking chapter master, clad in tactical dreadnought armor, would smash and break his way through almost any and all opposition. What opponents did not anticipate was how quickly 𝗘𝗏𝗂𝗃 moved when roused to battle, how his gauntlets became a blur in the ichor-slashed air, while his center of mass remained largely static, his thick plasteel and adamantium plates absorbing attacks with ease. The extra servo bundles in the armor's shoulders and arms allowed him to strike faster than even an unencumbered member of the Adeptus Astartes. It was this advantage that meant the first 3 Tyrannid warriors to board the Nicor hardly managed to land a single blow. 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗃𝗃, a dozen paces behind the Red Wake, hadn't even raised his staff. 𝗘𝗏𝗂𝗃 had advanced as far as the breach. He eviscerated another warrior as it dragged itself through the hull. Its reinforced chiton no match for his ancient lightning claw's disruptor fields. The lumen strips in the service corridor continued to dip on and off, occasionally throwing its length into darkness, the towering form of the Red Wake left silhouetted by the actinic crackling of his 2 fists.
The pod will continue producing and birthing bioforms,
𝗘𝗏𝗂𝗃 said, as if he wasn't single-handedly stymieing a tyrannid infestation of the Nicor's lower decks.
I'm going to purge it from within. Remain here, kill anything else that emerges.
Again, if any other besides the Red Wake had uttered such orders, 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗃𝗃 would have questioned them. Instead, he simply confirmed over the vox and took up position beside the breach. 𝗘𝗏𝗂𝗃 took one leaden step up into the orifice that had clamped and sealed around the acid-chewed hole. Servos groaning, he hauled his bulk into the opening. Beyond were the thousands of snaggle teeth that had gnawed through the hull, each longer than 𝗘𝗏𝗂𝗃 was tall. Past them was darkness, emitting a gut-churning alien reek. "Rangu and the wandering ancestors be with you, Red Wake," 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗃𝗃 said, as 𝗘𝗏𝗂𝗃 began to advance down the alien's gullet, squelching and crunching through membranous tissue and cartilage. If he heard the chief librarian, 𝗘𝗏𝗂𝗃 didn't answer. Instead, there was a roar, as Hunger and Slake's chain blade underbites activated.